Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to the Lifeonaire Show. I'm your host, Jason Wojo. On the Lifeonaire Show, just in case you did not know, if you weren't aware of this, we help people live lives and businesses that they love. We help people create awesome, abundant, prosperous lives and the businesses to help support those lives. And by the way, your business should also complement your life, not complete with it. And we help people do that. I am joined by my co-host, my Polish comrade, Polish Peter. I almost said Peter, Polish Peter Kolot, but I know you were trying to get away from that. Sorry, man.
How
many Polish Peters Piper can pick a pepper?
There we go. Now try to say that really fast, quickly.
Right, is that it? Polish Peter pick the pepper. All right, I'll practice that. I'll be back in another episode with that. Hey, man, so we got a really cool conversation coming up here with Kathy Neubauer. And she's like this, you know Kathy, I know Kathy. She's someone that really is good with people. Like, she's just so understanding with people. And I've always been fascinated by how she's been able to do this and how she can really connect with people and I think make them feel non-judged, like accepted, understood. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this particular kind of a call because, I use this profile that she's going to be talking about in my own coaching. And I want you guys to really pay attention to how she explains what she talks about, because you can really use it to your advantage, not only for yourself to know why you do the things that you do, but the people around you, how to communicate with people, how to have conversations, how to deal in stressful situations and all kinds of things like that. And it's a really, really powerful conversation to know about,
Yeah. And it's not to your advantage in a manipulative way.
Right.
It's in a way that really helps you in a really from a good place. And so I think you'll enjoy it as well. Let's jump right on in. Here's our interview with Kathy Neubauer. Hey, Kathy, welcome to the Lifeonaire Show. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, this is going to be such a great conversation. I can't wait. So Kathy, and for our listeners and viewers right now, Peter and I know Kathy. We've known Kathy for quite some time now. And Kathy, when I think of you, I think of someone who has this heart of gold for people, and you're just so approachable, and you're so easy to talk to, and you're so just calming, and you just seem to really understand people. And I can, I know for myself, certainly, this is something I see an incredible value in, not only for your own life, but also in kind of helping other people feel accepted, understood, validated, all the important, right? All of these things. Is this something, first of all, is this something you've always been good at? Is this just your personality, or did you develop this?
So I think part of it is my personality. I'll talk a little bit more about where I fall in a little bit, but a lot is how I'm wired and my perception of people. And I had a need to please people, right? That's part of how I think. And I really had to practice and study how to use that to my best benefit without damaging myself, right? Because I'm an empathetic person. And sometimes you can get too empathetic where you start to feel their pain. So I had to work on myself, and this program is what I went through to help with some of that.
Great. So listen, you just mentioned something. So what is your perception of people?
So honestly, I have developed a perception of the world being a friendly place, basically, and that everybody that I see now, and this is new for me, right? Because I used to live a very stressful life. Everyone I see now, I see what I call through the eyes of love. And so when I see something that I normally would have judged in the past, I now first think to me, I wonder what their story is. Mm-hmm. And because people react based on their stories, right? And based on who they are, how they think, and the experiences that have happened to them. And so I see them so much differently that I no longer feel threatened, right, by what I see. And so I don't have to judge them. And that has shifted my life tremendously. And, I feel like that is part of, what God wants us to do, right, is to love people unconditionally. And that practice takes effort, right? Because it's our natural our natural reaction to reject something not like us.
Well, or to feel threatened, and so if somebody's like, short with you in line at a grocery store, your natural thought is like, this person's a jerk and they're this and that, not realizing that they have, maybe there's a reason behind that, or the person at the gym who feels it necessary to take 1,000 selfies and wear the tightest clothes that they shouldn't be wearing. Well, there's a reason for that, right? They're not just, they're looking for something. There's something going on with their story. And I think and we can look everywhere in our lives and see these kinds of things. And when you can, and I don't think, I would guess, you probably can't judge and love at the same time. And so as I guess you have that realization, you see them from a place of love and understanding the story behind that. It's not, there's some need they're trying to meet. What an empowering perspective.
Yeah, it's changed my life, honestly, because I used to feel like, my life was a sacrifice and I had to be a certain way so that people would like me. And by shifting that, it also shifted how I saw myself, right? Because I could tie my own story into why some of my behaviors were the way they were. And I was able to work on those. And, it's all about, what's happened in our lives, right?
Right.
Yeah. And our awareness. So our awareness is where it all starts, right? Are we at an awareness of 5 feet surrounding us, or are we at awareness of, 50,000 feet looking down? And the closer you are to what's happening to you and your awareness, the more judgmental you'll be, right?
All right.
Because you're in that issue, you're in that moment, and that's when we tend to react without thinking, right?
One thing I just heard you say, Kathy, and I think this is really important for the listeners to get, is before, what I'm hearing from you is you were putting on to be somebody else, right? Putting on to be pleasing and all that kind of stuff, right? The people pleaser, all that kind of stuff. And it was tiring, wasn't it? And
Exhausting.
now when you finally kind of got to you are who you are, you just opened up who you truly are. And that makes a whole lot of difference, right?
Yeah.
Well, Peter, you were a people pleaser too.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can relate to what Kathy's saying,
Right.
Yeah. And you don't realize how much you're doing it until you step away from it, right? You don't realize the weight you carry when you're trying to, in your mind, adapt to what people need you to be. That's a heavy, heavy weight. And once you're allowed to be yourself and be authentic, it's like a piece that you can't explain, right?
How does somebody so now, whether we're talking about someone being a people pleaser or someone who's looking for attention and love or an acceptance through a different way, how does somebody go through that development stage where they can start to realize like what parts are really them and what parts are not them, and that they're doing this for external validation or whatever it is that they're pursuing?
Yeah. So the work that I do with a lot of people is have them go through a series of profiles for how they feel like they are today, right?
What do you mean by profile?
So one of them is, I'm certified with the Maxwell Behavioral Disc program. And that is very similar to like Tony Robbins disc, People Keys disc. There's other profiles such as Myers-Briggs and different personality study profiles. And then there's Enneagram, and there's the love languages, there's the apology languages. So as they pull all these profiles together, they can kind of see where their core base is. And it actually, for the Maxwell program, they actually give you graphs of where you fall in your core, which is how you developed from a childhood on up, and then how you adapt to the general public, and then how you believe that people see you. So there's 3 different graphs in there. And so when we see those graphs and we see shifts in those graphs that are significant, you can tell that there's something that's stressing that person out, right? There's something that shifted. So let's say I was a high S. So I'm actually a high I. And an S2, but if my S was super high, but when I'm adapting, it was lower, that would mean that I felt the need to not please people as much. So when people are trying to work on themselves as a people pleaser, sometimes we swing the pendulum way too much, right? We go from one side to the other, and that shows up in these graphs. And so as you try to work with the folks, you'll ask them questions like, when you're adapting, it shows that your people-pleasing traits drop significantly. Is there some reason that you feel that you don't want people to see that part of you? Because it is part of your core, right?
So
go ahead.
Do you feel that people's, and I want to, in a moment, I want to ask you more. You mentioned like the S and the I and things like that. And for people that are unfamiliar with that, I want to dive into that for a little bit more. But do you find that under periods of stress, people become more of what they really are and they kind of just show what they really are? Or does it change who they really are and maybe it's just their survival mechanism coming out or something like that? Like, is this the true you or is this the artificial you?
So I think under stress is when our reactions come more from our authentic part.
Okay.
But our attempt to please people or our attempt to shift people, that can be still an adaptation, right?
Okay.
So you can still walk into a room and try to pretend to be somebody so that you're respected or whatever your greatest fear is you're trying to protect. And then when you're stressed out, you struggle to maintain that adaptation. And so your reactions to something that happens can be much stronger towards your authentic self.
Got it. This is something I've always found fascinating, but also terrifying at the same time, because like I've noticed for myself, I've had to, like, I'm naturally not that high of an extrovert. I'm more introverted. Like I remember in college, like my roommates would go out and I would literally stay at home and I'd play guitar for 8 hours a day just because I'd be that guy to go to a party and I can't approach somebody and talk to them. And I was awkward and I'd go talk to my friend in the corner for the entire, and then I'd leave, I just didn't. And so I think, and I think all of us, and of course for what I do now, I've had to kind of develop this other thing and kind of really push myself and stretch myself because I realize this is an important thing. If I'm going to help people and impact people, I can't be in a corner, like just talking to myself. Right. And so I've had to develop that, but I find it fascinating. Peter, you wanted to say something there.
Yeah, so on the disc profile, you're a Z, aren't you?
A Z, yes. Right. So,
by the way, Kathy, how you explain someone who goes to gym and constantly lift things up and wants to look like big? Can you elaborate? What do you think about that particular person?
That's pathological, man. We can't, that's not going to be, that's, we're talking abnormal psychology now. We're in a different topic.
That's funny.
So tell people about you mentioned the disc test. Tell people, can you give, I don't know if you can, I know this is, there's thousands and thousands of pages written about this stuff. Could you do it justice, you think, in just a couple of minutes of just explaining for people that, first of all, where people can learn more about this, but even on this episode, I'd like to hear, could you give a few sentence description of each one of those four categories? Yeah.
So the disc, you can get it through the John Maxwell Consultants, which I am certified with John Maxwell, so you can get it through me. I do really like the Maxwell program even better than the free ones out there because it does give you the details. But basically, there's been studies forever and ever, and like I was quoting some of the other ones, Myers-Briggs and some of the other personality studies. All those scientists have come up with the same thing, is that people tend to fall in one of four categories. And so the categories are like for under the disc, the D is the more dominant, direct style, results driven, natural born leader kind of personality. And that personality falls under the direct personality as far as aggressiveness. And the I personality is the influencer, the interactor. They're very spontaneous, outgoing, trying to get people engaged with them, right? Their greatest fear is to not be approved. The greatest fear for a D personality is to not get results or to be taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
And so both of those personalities are the more aggressive personalities. They're not paying as much attention to details, right? They're idea people. They're constantly, when they get excited, their voice goes up, and people think they're yelling or being very domineering, right? And then the C person, the S personality is your steady, stable personality. Their greatest fear is security. Right. And so they want everything to stay harmonized and at peace. And they are the people pleaser personality because they're trying to maintain that stableness in their environment at all costs, whether it's at home or in business. So the C personality is the conscientious and cautious style. And they are the ones that are analytical and they're problem solvers. They need all the details, more details, the better. They can tend to not shut the data gate, so they're slower to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And the S and the C are the passive personalities, so they're complete opposite of the D and the I, right? And so they're not going to speak up first, usually in a group setting. They like smaller, quiet groups. The I and the D like recognition that is outward and known by everybody, and the S and the C like quieter recognition. And I forgot to mention that the C, their greatest fear is criticism. They are perfectionists. So they're so hard on themselves because they want to do everything perfect. And so sometimes they don't pull the trigger until they think it's perfect. And to them, obviously, we know perfect is never an option, right? No. It just doesn't exist. And so when you look at that in a 4-quadrant series where the D and the I are on the top, and then the S is below the I and the C is below the D, you have another split where the D and the C are task-driven, and the S and the I are people relational driven, right? And so they're the D and the I, or the D and the C personality, the direct and the conscientious personality, their reaction to everything is first based on logic. Right? It's task, it's facts, it's data, right? And so the people personalities are really based on emotion, right? And so they're connecting with what will people think? How can I get everybody to buy into things? Like they're always thinking relational first. And so when they have to do a task, they want to know how is it going to affect the people, right? Where the others will say, this is a task that needs to be done. I don't care how it affects the people, is their first response, right? And so there's they're just in 4 different quadrants. They're broken up in these different ways. And when you understand that, you can start to identify people without even having them take some of these tests. So when I meet someone, I can fairly quickly put them in categories by just asking myself, are they direct? Then they're an I or a D. Are they passive? Then they're a C or an S. Are they friendly and outgoing? Then they're probably relational, which puts them in the S category, right? And so when you start to learn this, all your customers and everybody you interact with, you can start to create and grow your own communication skills so that you can speak their language, because an S is an exact opposite of a D. And ironically, in relationships, we tend to attract our opposite, right? You always hear opposites attract. And one of the reasons for that is because we search for the traits that we have least of, right? And so we admire those traits until we disagree with them. Right.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
This, by the way, Kathy, this explains so much about Wojo. It's not even funny.
I feel like I'm bipolar, like after hearing this description right now.
That's why I said, you're a Z.
Yeah. I'm a mess.
The I personality is the exact opposite of the C. So if you think about the personality of an I that's very outgoing, constantly talking ideas and wants, silence is deadly to them, right? They just want to be talking. A C personality likes peace and quiet. They need alone time, where the I wants as many people around as possible. Now picture them married, right? Picture them in a relationship.
Right.
They don't understand each other. And so at first they love the fact that that person's analytical and a thinker and can problem solve. And that's their strength. And so they have that great connection of who's got what roles in the household. But before you know it, when you're in conflict, it's usually because about those same traits, right? That are so different.
So one thing, hold on.
Oh, go ahead.
One thing I don't want to overlook, I'll let you go, Wojo, in a minute, but one thing I don't want to overlook because you said something is once you figure out which quadrant you fall in, which category, like for instance, you're an I or a D, well, we need to know that we tend to speak to everybody from our own kind of a quadrant, right?
It's our natural
and a lot
response.
of times people don't realize that, you know, and they want to be understood and they want to be good. But once you figure that part out and start seeing what are the other people, then you can start learning how can I communicate so they can get me. Not so much from my own language, but from their own language.
Exactly. And that is the challenge, right?
Yeah.
Everybody that I talk to, most of them, I won't say everybody, but most of the people that I talk to say I've taken this DISC stuff before. And I said, well, how did you use it?
Right.
Because all they've done is read about how they are, but they have not implemented the whole meaning behind the program, right? And so it really takes effort because when you talk to people, and particularly the Ds, they have least amount of patience for stuff like this. And that is not a put down, that's just how they're wired. And so their first reaction is, it's too much work. Why do I have to be the one to change? And what good is it going to do, right? And so the work that we do is not to change who we are. It is not to change who we are. It is to grow our communication skills so that we can develop good connecting relationships, right? So it is not about change. It is about understanding and empathy, right?
Right. Well, you know, two things really strike me about this, Kathy. One is that you kind of alluded to this when you mentioned the D, right? There's no category or level of any of these that's better or worse than another. It just is what it is. It's not like if you're high I, you're a better person, or you're better this, you're better that. You're just a high I. You're a low C. It doesn't mean you're not this or that. That's just what it is. There's no better or worse. It's just different. And then the coolest thing I think about this is, and you alluded to this when you just mentioned empathy, is when you can understand this classification system to a full extent, you can internalize it, you can understand and identify people. It allows you to see their behavior from the perspective of like, no, it's not that they're just, you know, messy. It's not that they're just absent-minded. It's not that they're just like a perfectionist and over analytical. This is their personality. It's not them. And I think you withdraw the judgment of the person and you see the cause as being this is just the way they're wired, naturally wired. Right. And so it allows you to have that connection with them much more authentically and without judgment or any kind of, like, why are they doing that? Why are they like this? And it just it becomes so much more objective that I feel like it allows you to really connect with the person and see them from the way they're wired.
That's absolutely correct. And when you can do that, it shifts from hearing people as defending themselves against what you're saying. It shifts them just to have conversation about how your thoughts are wired. So when people are in conflict, that's when it happens the most, right? Is that we're responding with our own way of our own languages. And you know, the D and the I personality, when they're in conflict, they want to get it resolved then. The passive personality, the C and the S, they retreat. They need to process it. And so what happens is in a conflict situation, the C or the S tend to walk away and they don't resolve it, right? They just walk away. It's kind of that fight or flight, right? They'll walk away from the conversation. And so what I work with people is to have that come together again to discuss it when the heat is down, right? And so when you think about the different personalities, they've done many, many studies that show in the population, there's about 3% of the personalities that are D style. And there's 11% that are I personalities. And there is 17% that are the C personalities. 69% are the S personalities.
Wow.
So if you add, from the task versus relational categories, 80% of the population is relational, right? And so when you start to think about those kind of things, and you're really trying to be an influencer out there, I recommend that you start off with some of the warm and fuzzy feeling kind of conversations to capture your audience, right? To capture who you're trying to influence first, because the D's and the C's can tolerate it for a few minutes, but it's really, if you're trying to speak to a large group or something like that, you want to meet and connect as quickly as you can with them. And entrepreneurs, I'll say, when we deal with an entrepreneur setting, those percentages shift a little bit, right? Because you're dealing with a specific group, and it takes some stronger personalities sometimes to be entrepreneurs. The relational ones, it takes a little more effort, right?
Right.
So
just in confidence perspective.
So that's an interesting point. And so would you say that there is a distinction based on where people kind of navigate throughout their professional life, that they find, like, for instance, I would imagine, I don't know if this is true, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe entrepreneurs tend to be more driven, more direct, versus somebody who's perhaps finds joy in a customer service position. Maybe they're more of a relationship person, and they're, and so I guess this may be one of the things that kind of influences people upon which career choice they pick. And I'm guessing that, these show up in every area of our lives. It's not just in business, it's in our relationships, it's in our family dynamics, it's in all these things. Where does this stuff come from? Like, where are people? Is this nature versus nurture? Is it both of them? Is this when you're children, you have experiences? Like, is there any data or evidence or research talks about this?
Yeah. So they talk about when we're first born, we're born with certain genetics of our parents, right? And then very quickly we start to identify traits that our parents are. So we learn that to cry will be fed or our diaper change, right? We start to pick up these little responses of how another human being is connecting with us, even as infants. So you can watch as your child is growing up and they hit the terrible twos, right? That is first them understanding, if I say no, right? Mommy says no, don't do that all the time, or daddy says no, don't do that. Well, now I've picked up that when I don't want something, I say no to, right? They're picking up these characteristics. And so by the age of, between the ages of 4 and 8 is where we're starting to establish these subconscious characteristics, I guess I would say, and coping mechanisms. Even though we don't know why, I watch my granddaughter, who's now 9, but the little things that they start to put together, like my son and his wife were going to adopt some kids, and totally unrelated, my daughter-in-law would get upset with Maddie and say, Maddie, what am I going to do with you? And so Maddie took that to believe that they're bringing in new kids and she's going to be out. Right. And so
because mommy figured out what to do with her.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So where am I going? Right. And so what's happening is our children are creating their own stories as little as they are. Right. That all starts at 4 years old. And that's when you start to see in the child their imagination playing, and they're parroting what they're seeing around them. This is becoming a part of them, right? And so if they come from an abusive situation or a situation that is poverty or a struggle, or they see parents stressing or alcoholism or addictions, they start to develop these traits quite often about being silent, right? Protecting themselves. I won't get in trouble if I'm silent. and their worthiness starts to develop very young. And then as they start to get into school age, which is above 8 and to 12, they start getting influences of teachers and other kids and bullying and all those experiences. And that develops other coping skills, like how do you protect yourself from bullying and the negativity around them. I don't dress the same. I'm heavier than the other person. And they start their own personal judgment. And often that's when they start judging others too, right? Mm-hmm. That's how it's all starting to develop. And so by the time they're fighting for their independence in junior high, this is now where they're trying to what seems like a rebellious situation in their household, right? They're trying to find their own identity and trying to figure out, who am I? And they're starting to stand up for some of the things that they've created, what they believe in. And so parents try to squash a lot of that because they see it as rebellion rather than the person tried to come into themselves.
It's right? Exploration, not rebellion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so they start to have these bigger arguments, which can cause bigger wounds. And I've talked to people already where some of these experiences, so for instance, if you're a D personality and you're raising a D child, that they're both very direct, but neither one want to be told what to do, and they both want to win, right? Mm-hmm. And so often the parent is going to win, but the way that they approach that with the D personality child is through dominance, right? They get very strong with them. And so what happens is that child with the D personality begins to lose confidence in themselves. And they begin to think that they're not right, like something's wrong with them. And so that goes true in the I personality too. The I personality is that socializer. So if you're a passive parent and you don't recognize the personality of a socializer, you think they have ADD, right? You think they're hyper. You think something's wrong. You can't get them to be quiet. And so when I was the I personality in grade school, I literally got detentions for being too happy-go-lucky. And so what happened to me, which I later understood, but I didn't know it at the time, what happened to me is I started to pull myself back. Like I can't be who I am because I get in trouble for smiling. I get in trouble for being excitable. I get in trouble for these things. And so that was that as a child, right? And the S personality, they can be so pleasing that people think they're weak, right? Mm-hmm. And so as children with the S personality, a lot of times they can be bullied, right? Because the dominant ones are the strong personalities, and sometimes they will pick on the ones that appear weaker, even though that's not the truth. It's just how it's interpreted, right?
Right.
And the C personality, because they're so analytical, oftentimes they're book thinkers, right? They're studiers, they're detail people. A lot of people may classify them as nerdier, right? Or not like them, right? And so there's all these different influences that start to create who we are as we're a child. All these different experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally see how this can quickly become a pretty convoluted web when, for instance, say you're a high I, and you don't have maybe it's not that you have an experience yourself, but you have a parent who's a high I, and now they dominate the conversations because they're so talkative, and or maybe you see them and their friends, and you can notice their friends kind of being like, oh my gosh, this person won't be quiet, they won't shut up, and then you learn, gosh, I shouldn't talk that much. So now you suppress your own I, or you see or you see the bullying, like you mentioned, you're like, oh, I can't be like that, I don't want to get bullied. And so like, wow, it seems like how quickly you can start to make these like decisions that'll influence how you kind of accept yourself. And also there does seem, to your point earlier about this adaptive thing, there seems to be some environmental influence as well. Like I'm thinking about for myself, Like if I'm in a room of people that all of them I know, I'm having a blast. I'm talking to everybody. Yeah. But if it's a bunch of strangers that I don't know, like I have a harder time going up to people.
Right.
And so it's just strange how this can play out for people.
Right.
But I mean, I don't know if there's something that can have a larger impact on your quality of relationships with people other than by understanding yourself and understanding the people you're trying to connect with.
Right. And I think that is really the key, is to understand. So what people tend to do is they want to be a different personality. They want to be somebody else when they have these feelings that who they are is not okay. And because our world and society can feel negative, like the news, social media, all these stuff create comparisons. And it's very common for people to compare themselves to who they admire, right? Or who they want to be based on how they look, how they act, and all this stuff. And so they think they want to change who they are. And the real thing is to understand who you are and where you need to work on for your personal growth. If you want to be that socializer, like you, Wojo, you said, I worked at it. And you did, oh gosh, it just escapes me, the program that you did for public speaking.
Yeah, I went through Toastmasters.
Yeah, right. Toastmasters, yeah.
That didn't work very well, though.
But you step out of your comfort zone and you just push yourself to a different level of who you are, right? And so you just become that by stepping out of your comfort zone. And you can lead a happier life when you can feel whole and connected, right? And so what happens is we start to feel sorry for ourselves and we go deeper into not liking ourselves. And when we self-talk within ourselves, we're our own worst enemy many times. Mm-hmm. And so then we can't be the person we want to be on the outside. If we continue to self-talk ourselves down, then we can't, it's our lid, right? It's our lid that holds us from being better out in the general public because we're constantly worried of what people are going to think of us, right?
Right.
And so it's really working that from the inside out. And some of these tools that we have allow you, and a lot of times, it takes assistance, right? It takes somebody to be your coach, or it takes dedication to do it yourself. If you're going to just self improve on your own, that takes serious dedication. It's so much easier to be doing that kind of growth in a group because you can be held accountable for that growth. You can have the blind spots because we can't always see what it is we're missing. And so the blind spots are where the growth happens. And if we can't see beyond 5 feet around us, right, we can't develop ourselves by ourselves, right?
Well, Kathy, I really want to thank you for being on the Lifeonaire show. And what you shared, I think, is really important for all of our listeners and viewers to understand, is to not only how you yourself can not only understand yourself so that you can find your authenticity and what how you're wired, but also equally as important is that you can connect with other people in a fruitful relationship, one of understanding, acceptance, non-judgment, and really incredible things could happen when that occurs. So thanks again for being on.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right, there we go, man. That was a great conversation. I really enjoyed that. I was familiar with the DISC test already, and Kathy really has just taken it to another level. And I mean, at some point, I guess you got to choose which diagnostic tools you're going to use too, because she mentioned there's the Myers-Briggs, there's all these other ones too. The DISC I think is pretty good though. So have you taken this test?
Yeah, I have taken this a while ago. Yeah, I actually use it with my students. I've taken it myself.
What are you like? What are your, like, if you had to give like a scale from 1 to 10 on the DISC, what would you say you are?
I'm 100% at all 4 of them.
100%.
All 4, yes. No, I am like a high I.
Peter, there's no better or worse. There's no better or worse.
I'm like 99 at I, Like, so I'm really high kind of a person. You can kind of tell, I'm very outgoing and being sociable and joking around and all that kind of stuff. And then a little bit lower, I'm an ass, a little bit of a.
Did you wait? Did you just say S, or did you just say something else? It sounded like
ass. Listen, I want you guys to completely.
Dude, you cannot swear. You can't swear on the podcast, bro. I'm sorry.
Right.
You cannot swear.
To that point, I just want to say I'm going to be having a conversation with Kathy to hopefully bring her on this podcast. And on the next episode, we're going to dissect Jason Wojo for the entire episode. Let's have that kind of a conversation.
So you think you're an I and an S, okay? I think this is why our friendship works so well, because I think I'm a D and a C.
You are a D and a C.
So
you're a really high D, and the C. I just don't want to even talk about that. Yeah.
Peter, I feel like you're judging me right now. If you listen to Kathy, you're not supposed to judge. I'm
just stating the facts.
Well, listen,
people want to listen to this.
Yeah, in all seriousness, like, this is an incredibly useful tool. Right.
Yes,
because
totally.
I've spoken to people and I've noticed behaviors and to myself, I'd wonder, like, why have they done that? Why do they do that? Why do they talk like that? And sometimes I found myself, like, not understanding, but as soon as I understood this tool and realized this is just the way they're wired, or this is part of their story, and part of the reason why anybody is like the way they are is because of the things they've been through. It's just an incredibly powerful realization and a tool.
Yeah, there really is. And one other thing that's really important about this is that this tool is really important in the most important relationships in your life, because those are the very emotional kind of relationships that you're in, right? So what ends up happening a lot, we get so emotionally wrapped up that when we get to see, like, beforehand, okay, this person is a high I or high D, then it allows us to have a much better communication with those people that are closest to us, kids, significant others, parents, whoever it might be,
and to let them express that way, like, without trying to, like, stifle them or say they can't be like that or judge them, or, like, just let them be them, like, find out, let them kind of, like, let them grow into that and express that. It's super powerful. It's really cool. And this is, like you said, like, this is not just in business, right? This isn't, but I mean, now don't get me wrong, there are applications here everywhere. Like, if you're a salesperson, understanding your customer, you could do it that way. If you're team, leading your team, understanding how to talk to your people. If it's your personal relationships, your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your kids, all of these things, right? Your parents. And so it's just a tool that you can always use. And I think you get to a point where you understand it and have internalized it so much that it doesn't have to be a conscious thing. You kind of, like, almost put it on autopilot to some extent. But certainly during the beginning stages, as you become familiar with these, with the tests and the characteristics of each of these different, the D, I, S, and C, it's gonna be a little bit of an effort. You're gonna have to kind of really pause and practice it. And so, but yeah, learn everything you can about this. There are other ones as well. I'm sure they're all beneficial to some extent. Kathy mentioned the Enneagram, which I've heard a lot of recently. The 16 personality 16 personalities website talks about, like, the Myers-Briggs protocol and things like that. And so, fascinating stuff. Real life applicable. Go ahead and use it. Hope you've enjoyed the episode. If you have enjoyed the episode, leave us a review, please. We would appreciate it. We'd love it. We'd love to hear from you. Also, be part of the Lifeonaire community and download the Lifeonaire app to your mobile device, iPad, or you can go to lifeonaire.com to get the desktop version. I think it's just lifeonaire.com/app. Might be the link, or just go to lifeonaire.com. You'll find it there as well. As always, thank you for listening. We greatly appreciate your time. We hope we have served you, and we will see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.